it's my fault. I'm the bad guy for doing the job that the media should have done in vetting Paco, a poor farmer, hardworking small business owner who was abducted off the streets of Olympia, Washington by ICE. Apparently it's my fault for looking into that, doing just a little tiny bit of work and showing that Paco wasn't even Paco at all and the whole story wasn't true. And now I'm the bad guy. I'm a racist. I'm somehow a homophobe. I don't know. I thought Paco had a wife. I don't know how homophobia comes into all of this. You guys, this is insane. It's absolutely insane. I was telling Nicole, I feel like I'm going to have some sort of, like, I was like checking my heart rate when I walked in the door today. I'm livid over this, and there's so many reasons. We'll dive into it. So just a quick background refresher for those who aren't familiar with our Paco exclusive. The Olympian newspaper, which is a McClatchy paper, and that's important here because McClatchy is a wire service. So when one McClatchy paper publishes something, guess what happens? It goes to all the other McClatchy papers too. So this didn't just go to the readers of the Olympian. It was published in all these other newspapers as well. The headline, Lacey business owner abducted by ICE, according to online fundraiser. And it had this sketch of a nice man on a horse and claimed his name was Paco. And this entire story was based off of the tale being spun by an anti-ICE activist on a GoFundMe page. The Olympian didn't vet one single sentence of it. Just took the claims in this fundraiser, put it out there as a news story, used the word abducted in the headline, didn't look into a damn thing. So even though the rest of the mainstream news doesn't consider us to be a news outlet, we did the journalistic work that they aren't willing to do. And we spent days digging into this Paco character. You, the undivided viewers, were key in uncovering the truth behind Paco. And it turns out Paco wasn't Paco at all. Paco was an illegal Mexican national named Yusef Zarate Bourbon who was wanted for murder in Mexico. So ICE wasn't even the entity that arrested him. It was Homeland Security investigations working with the U.S. Marshals because they had a guy who was wanted for murder. So no, they didn't abduct him off the streets. They took him into custody, and he's going to be sent back to Mexico to maybe face the music for his alleged crime. So last week, we spent all 4 days of our live shows last week, and every day we learn more and more about this situation by doing, between Nicole and I and you, basic research to figure out what was going on in this case, because anyone with a brain would have looked at that GoFundMe by a woman who's all over social media saying and would have said, this sounds awful suspicious. You know, maybe ICE had a good reason for picking this guy up. And you're not even giving us any information. You're calling him Paco. She's raising thousands of dollars for this guy on a story that was so incredibly suspicious. But the Olympian didn't find it suspicious? Or maybe they did and they didn't care. Because anything that makes Donald Trump look bad, ICE look evil, they're going to print as fact. So we do all this research. We fully debunk the Paco story. Expose him as Yusef. And as I was railing last week, the Olympian just left their story up. And they added a little editor's note saying, we're looking into this because GoFundMe has removed the fundraiser. And the reporter was on vacation. This Rolf Boone guy. And I said, look, okay, there's no one else at the Olympian that can just hit delete. No one else in the whole freaking building or with McClatchy newspapers that can just say, hey, that story's been debunked. Let's just take it down. At the very least, so it doesn't continue to spread this narrative that this poor Paco guy was abducted by ICE. No, apparently we've got to wait for Rolf Boone to get back from vacation. And he wouldn't respond to any of our requests for comment, but he was on social media saying, I'm aware that this is happening. I'm on vacation till Monday, so I'm not going to respond to anything until then. So Monday comes and goes. First thing we did Monday morning before yesterday's show is we looked, has the Olympian updated their story yet? Nothing. We're like, okay, maybe he's back from vacation. He's looking into it. Which, like, what is there to look into? We did all the work for you. We did all your job for you. So it comes out today. So I'm just pulling in to the studio today when I'm pinged with, the Olympian put out an updated story. For the love of God, it's even worse. Before you even get to it, Nicole, What did I say last week? What did I say last week would happen? I said, you can go back and roll the tape from Thursday's show. I said, here's what they're going to do. They're going to come out. They're going to put out an updated story. They're going to find someone else to blame. They're not going to take any accountability whatsoever for putting out a fully unvetted story and somehow paint me as the enemy. Do I know the media or do I know the media?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know the media.
I know the media because I used to be the media. I used to be in these newsrooms. I know how these newsrooms work. God forbid they admit that they're wrong about something.
Never.
Never. And look, I'm not perfect before I get into this. I'm not perfect. I've gotten things wrong before. It's pretty rare. I've gotten things wrong before in my old career in the news, and it's the worst feeling ever if you actually care about your job and your journalistic integrity. Getting something wrong is the worst feeling ever. But I can't imagine having ever done that and just let it be, or not immediately took accountability and immediately corrected it, even when it was really, really difficult. It's always difficult. Having to admit you're wrong as a journalist is always difficult. It always sucks. When it happened to me the first time, I thought my career was over. I thought I'd never get a job in news again. And you know what? I admitted I was wrong. The person I was wrong about accepted my apology, and we all moved on. So I'm not perfect. We've gotten stuff wrong on this show before. Nothing particularly serious, but little things here and there. And what do I always do? Maybe even in a way that Nicole doesn't particularly like. I'll derail the whole show. At the beginning of the show, I won't bury it in some 30 minutes in. At the beginning of the show, what do? I say, hey, I got something wrong on the show on such and such a day. I want to correct it. It's happened a few times. Because I do opinion, but if I don't have any integrity, then what good am I? If my opinions aren't based in fact, then what good am I? So the fact that I have more journalistic integrity than actual journalists is wild, and it just speaks to the state of the legacy media. So let's get to this freaking story, for the love of God. So they didn't even take down the old story, by the way. Still up. They just added a new one. The headline, a GoFundMe raised money for Paco. Here's what we know about that effort. And Rolf Boone puts Paco in quotes. Okay, so now, of course, because Paco isn't a real person. But now instead of the sketch of the guy on the horse, it has the photo that was taken of Youssef when he was arrested. This is insane. So first, you already know. Nowhere in this entire follow-up, despite having a week and a day to fix it, do they take accountability. Nowhere is there an apology. There's clearly not a retraction because the old story is up. Nowhere do they accept accountability for anything, and that's disgusting. You printed an entire story that was shared far and wide saying ICE abducted some guy named Paco who didn't even really exist. So Rolf doesn't take accountability for it all. I'll read the first couple paragraphs. A GoFundMe campaign that raised money for a man identified only as Paco has been removed from the fundraising website amid allegations that the man is facing murder charges in Mexico. The co-organizer of the GoFundMe campaign, Olympia area resident Kruse Miller, told the Olympian she was unaware of the allegations against the man and said there was no attempt to defraud donors to the campaign. The Olympian wrote about the GoFundMe campaign on July 22nd, saying it had raised $9,800 of a $10,000 goal to help a Thurston County resident, quote, abducted by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The Olympian reached out to Miller at the time to ask her questions about the incident, but she didn't reply. Specific details about the incident also were not immediately available from ICE. Days after the story was published, Western Washington conservative media personalities, that's just me, reported that Paco had been identified as Youssef Zarate Bourbon, 34. The man is accused of homicide in Mexico, according to the X account of Homeland Security Investigations Pacific Northwest. So they reference in there that they wrote a story about this, and then they blame, people didn't answer our request for comment. We reached out to Kruse Miller. She didn't reply. We reached out to ICE. They didn't reply. So you thought it was a good idea to just do the story anyway? That was mistake number one. You couldn't get any additional information. You decided it was a good idea to take a completely unvetted narrative and just put it out there as a news story using the word abducted in the headline at a time when ICE agents are being assaulted because people like you are spreading lies that they're abducting and kidnapping people off the streets. No accountability. Not the Olympian regrets this error. Simple. The Olympian regrets not having done more research before publishing the initial story. Nothing. So then it gets into the reporting they should have done initially, and it talks about what this guy's accused of, his businesses that he ran, has some, they talked to Carissa Miller. Finally, she responds to someone, the woman behind the GoFundMe, and, talks to them a little bit. And then they get into this last segment of the story. And it's very important that this is the last segment of the story that they write, because this is what readers walk away with. It says, fallout from the fundraiser. Meanwhile, Carissa Miller said she has been inundated with hate-filled messages, causing her to delete her social media presence. The blowback got so bad that she turned to Western States Center, a civil rights organization based in Portland, for assistance. They quote the senior organizer, Kate Bitts, of the Western States Center. When our team checks in with people who are experiencing a deluge of hostile calls, emails, and social media comments, which can sometimes include actionable threats, we always make sure to tell the person that this situation is not their fault. She goes on to tell the Olympian, this is the last paragraph of the story. The influencers targeting these individuals are constantly in need of a new person to point at, whether that's a local leader standing up for their LGBTQ plus constituents, an activist speaking frankly about racism, or a small business owner setting up a fundraiser for a neighbor who's been taken by ICE. End story. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That is outrageous. It's defamatory. You don't have to say my name for people to know who you're talking about. We're the ones who reported it. We're the ones who debunked it. So now, for some reason, Carissa Miller getting death threats and all of this is squarely on my shoulders. And for some reason, you're also suggesting that I attack people who are standing up for the LGBTQ community and activists speaking frankly about racism. So now, because I exposed the truth, the simple truth, that your story was wrong, rather than admit you were wrong and correct your errors, you're using it as an opportunity to paint me as a racist and, oddly, a homophobe? It's defamatory. And look, yes, it's journalistic malpractice, but we've come to accept that, right? We've come to accept that. The fact that you couldn't just do the difficult thing that all good journalists at some point in their career have to do and admit the error of your ways, make a retraction, make an apology. You couldn't do that. Absolutely unacceptable for you to have done that, right? You can't do that. So let's leave the initial false story up and let's create a new story painting Carissa Miller as the victim and painting Brandi Kruse as the devil for doing the job that we should have done in the first place. And let me just say that I went out of my way to give Carissa Miller the benefit of the doubt. And yes, it's true. She took down her Instagram account. The GoFundMe was taken down. It's not going to be put back up. Even though this woman pushed out an unvetted narrative just based on her personal perspective of what happened, even though she's on her social media pages putting out hashtag Chinga la Migra, F immigration, even though it was very clear that she hates ICE and was spinning a narrative, she didn't have the obligation that a journalist has to get the facts correct. It was very clear that this was her perspective of what had happened. And what did I say on this show? I said I would be shocked if she knew that he was wanted for murder in Mexico. What did I say from the very beginning? I said, I'm sure there is some guy who lives by her and owns a farm who was picked up by immigration, but I'm sure there's more to the story. I gave this woman every benefit of the doubt. I said, maybe she is just a good-hearted neighbor. She's worried about this dude who she's come to know and like, but that doesn't make her story true. But now I'm the enemy because I did what the Olympian should have done to begin with. Now, I have emailed the Olympian yet again today. Keep in mind, we did far more work and vetting and groundwork on this story than the Olympian did. And what did we do? We reached out to both Carissa Miller and the reporter at the Olympian and the editors at the Olympian multiple times, including before we ever did a story on the Paco debacle, because we were doing our jobs. And hey, had Carissa Miller gotten back to us and said, I'm not sure what his last name is, or given us, we said, you could even give us information on background if you're worried about his identity or his family. We just want to be able to confirm it. And had she done that early on, this wouldn't have turned into such an ordeal. But again, I would argue the onus isn't necessarily on her. Although I would say if you're going to ask people for money, you should probably have a good idea of what's going on. The onus is on the Olympian. And what I told the Olympian in an email this morning when I demanded a retraction and an apology by the end of business today is I said, none of this would have happened. Rolf Boone, had you done your job, done even the basics of your job, had an ounce of curiosity, ounce of skepticism about someone who's chingala migra all over her social media accounts, and maybe she was spinning a tale. Maybe ICE didn't abduct this guy. Maybe there was a reason he was arrested. Maybe I should figure out his last name or really any identifying. Had you done the basics of your job, even spent 5 to 10 minutes looking into this, we wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't have found a GoFundMe down in Olympia for some guy named Paco. We wouldn't have come across that. It was a story for us because the Olympian made it a story without verifying anything at a time when immigration agents are being harassed, doxxed, assaulted, and almost killed. And they chose in that political environment, in that hostile climate, to add fuel to the fire of division and hate and anger, rather than fulfill their obligation to you, to the public. They're supposed to stand in the breach and provide truth and facts and information to the populace and to their readers. But instead, they're just looking to push a political narrative. Facts be damned. So because you couldn't do that, I'm the enemy? This woman has to reach out to a civil rights organization to protect her from me? And I'm a homophobe and a racist? It's unreal. And the media has done this to me many times, right? I'm always right-wing this, blah, blah, this. They always have to couch it in conservative this. Okay, I might be a conservative media member, but I did a better job than you did, didn't I? So what does that say about you? It's wild. And yes, I'm pissed off about it. Because you think people who read The Olympian are then turning on my show to get my perspective on this? To get the truth? No, we talk about it all the time. It's the passive news consumer, and they read crap like this. They form their opinion about ICE. How many people read that initial story that was out that is still up today? Still up. How many people read that initial story not only in the Olympian, but across the McClatchy publications, across the state of Washington? And it's reinforcing the anger some of them might already have and the hate some of them might already have toward Donald Trump and immigration. And then, of course, I'm the bad guy as always. I'm the bad guy as always for doing what? Telling the simple truth. Do I tell it with a few swear words here and there? Sure. Do I tell it with a little color and pizzazz? Sure. Do I couch it in my opinion? Sure. But when we wrap up this show every single day, I feel confident that we told people the truth. And we let people form their own opinions based off the truth and reality. And I don't think that's too much to ask of actual journalists and the legacy news and the Fourth Estate. So I've asked the Olympian for an apology and a retraction, specifically of that last paragraph, by the end of business today. Now, I also think that they should take accountability somewhere in this article for their own shortcomings on the reporting around Paco. But I don't really have a say in that. Readers do if you have a subscription to the Olympian. Might be something you want to email the editors about today. Kindly, of course, because I always encourage you to do so kindly, and you're just kind people. So I can't control whether they want to be journalistic and have, editorial standards. But I do have a say when they publish falsehoods and defamatory statements about me that any reasonable person would understand they're talking about me. And I won't tolerate it. I simply will not tolerate it. Wild.